company to which corporate social responsibility or CSR provisions apply should spend at least 2% of its average net profits towards CSR during a financial year. Corporate law contains certain inclusions and exclusions while computing net profits for CSR. In practice, I've noticed that not all companies carry out these adjustments while computing its CSR obligation. In today's video, I'll share some practical insights on adjustments that may help you determine the appropriate amount of CSR spent. There are three parts. Part 1 captures an overview of the requirements in law. Part 2 captures how to compute net profits, and in part 3 we'll walk through a few case studies or examples to better understand the impact of these adjustments, especially from surplus funds deployed by a company. Let's start with the overview of the requirements in the law. CSR provisions apply to companies which meet specified financial criteria. That is, the net worth is 500 crores or more, it has a turnover of 1000 crores or more, or has net profits of 5 crore or more during any financial year. The provisions are contained in Section 135 of the Companies Act and Companies Corporate Social Responsibility Policy Rules 2014. A company shall ensure that it spends in every financial year at least 2% of its average net profits earned during 3 preceding financial years. Extracts of the relevant portion of the law is available in the link below the video. Now, let's try and understand how to compute net profits. Typically, most companies compute CSR profits at 2% of its profits before tax as determined in the financial statements. The law contemplates certain inclusions and certain exclusions while computing net profits. Adjustments are specified in section 198. These inter alia include the following items while arriving at net profits. Profits of a capital nature, including profits from sale of undertaking. Surplus in the profit and loss account on measurement of an asset or liability at fair value. Any amount representing unrealized gain or loss on revaluation of assets. In addition, CSR rules also exclude any profits arising from overseas branches and companies, dividends from companies in India. I've attempted to throw light on some circumstances where these adjustments may be relevant, especially from items which may be from surplus funds deployed by the company. Now let's go over to some examples to better understand the inclusion and exclusions. One assumption that runs through all the examples, or is an underlying assumption, is that the company has adopted India as while preparing its financial statements. Let's start with treatment of dividend income. One may earn dividend income from investments in equity or preference shares in overseas companies, dividend from mutual funds, dividend from equity or preference shares in domestic companies. Now let's start with whether dividend from equity or preference in overseas companies should be excluded. CSR rule states that whilst calculating net profits, any profits arising from overseas branches and profits from overseas companies should be reduced. Given that the intention is to exclude any income earned outside India from the ambit of net profit, it should be safe to conclude that the dividend from overseas companies should be excluded while computing net profits for CSR. Now, let's try and understand if dividend income from equity or preference shares in domestic companies should be excluded. CSR rule states that dividend income would be excluded where 3 conditions are satisfied. Dividend income is from a company in India, CSR provisions are applicable to such company, and 3, such companies complying with CSR provisions. One will have to assess whether provisions are applicable to the investing company. In other words, whether it has a net worth of 1000 crore or more, or has a turnover of 500 crore or more, or whether it has profits of 5 crore or more. If any of these conditions are satisfied, one can say that the CSR provisions are applicable. One would also need to check if the operating entity is complying with the requirements of CSR. To assess if this requirement is met, one may need to review the disclosure by the investor in the financial statements. It may also be a good practice to obtain confirmation from the investing entity that it is complying with CSR provisions wherever feasible. Where both requirements are met, dividends received could be excluded from net profits while computing CSR. Whether dividend income from mutual funds should be excluded, since mutual funds are not organized as companies, any dividend received would not be excluded while computing net profits. What about other income from mutual funds? Gain or loss from mutual fund may be recognized as mark-to-market income or expense in the financial statements based on the net asset value or NAV of the funds as on the date the financial statements were prepared. When the units in the mutual fund are sold, mark-to-market gains is reversed and the realized gain or loss is recognized in the P&L. This gives rise to the question on how should mark-to-market gains and realized gains or losses be treated while computing net profits for CSR. Section 198 has been amended in 2017 to specifically exclude any amount representing unrealized gains or losses from revaluation of assets. Since mark-to-market gains is unrealized gain, it could be excluded while computing net profits for CSR. Having said that, a question would also arise on the characterization of income when the units are sold or redeemed. The profits can be characterized as capital profits and therefore excluded from the ambit of net profit while computing CSR obligation. Now, how should one understand this term capital profits? There is significantly evolved jurisprudence under the tax law on what may or may not constitute capital profits. Should those principles be used, or should one independently determine characterization based on nexus with business? That is, when the gains from sale is not linked to business, should it be treated as capital and therefore excluded? Would you look at the nomenclature while reporting income in the financial statements? Would the disclosure as trade or non-trade or as current or non-current be decisive? When mutual fund investments are made from surplus funds which are not required for trade or for business purposes, and investment is not carried out as a business activity or a trade activity, there should be no incongruity in the conclusion. It should be safe to say that the tax outcome and the corporate law outcome is identical, and the profits are characterized as capital in nature. Classification as current or non-current in the financial statements would be based on the period of maturity and is not reflective of the intention behind making the investment. The accounting classification and the nomenclature should therefore not be decisive. However, appropriate disclosure in the financial statements as mark-to-market gains and unrealized gains and gains from sale of mutual funds would help advocate this position if and when questioned. Now let's try and understand interest income from bank deposits and whether that needs to be included or excluded. Interest income from bank deposits are revenue in nature. In the absence of any specific exclusion, they would need to be included as a part of net profits. What about income from zero coupon bonds? What are zero coupon bonds? These are investments that are acquired at a discount and redeemed at a face value. The difference between the purchase price and the par value indicates the investor's return. How should the following income be treated? Unrealized gains before sale or maturity, income earned on maturity, and sale prior to maturity. Income from ZCBs is recognized in the financial statement based on time basis. That is, income is recognized over the period for which the instrument was held. The nomenclature typically used to recognize unrealized gain on ZCBs in the financial statements is interest. Contractually, an investor would not be able to enforce any payment from the investee, that is the issuer of the ZCB, till the maturity event. It is therefore safe to say the amount recognized in the financial statements prior to maturity is unrealized income or gain, notwithstanding the nomenclature of interest which is used in the financial statements. What about treatment of income earned on maturity? Where these are redeemed on maturity event and they are treated as interest both in financial statements as well as for tax purposes, there will be little leeway to say that these need to be excluded. It would be viewed on par with bank deposits and therefore need to be included as a part of net profit. The tax law deems income from ZCBs of specified criteria as capital in nature. It may be difficult to extend such a deeming fiction to corporate law as well. When the income is not in the nature of capital profit, it ought to be included as a part of net profit. Therefore, any income from ZCB on maturity should be included as a part of net profits. Would the answer change where these ZCBs are sold prior to maturity? From a tax law standpoint, there are strong arguments to support the viewpoint that income from sale of ZCBs is capital in nature. This is based on a complex interpretation of facts in law. The position adopted by the company in its tax return and financial statements would also be determinative while arriving at the conclusion that income from ZCBs are of capital nature. A plausible argument is that such a characterization of under tax law can also be used under corporate law. Such a view may not be free from doubt. One may argue that the characterization for corporate law need not follow tax characterization. There is no clear answer to this issue. The objective of this discussion was to highlight the possible viewpoints in this matter and the nebulous nature of the issue involved. Now, let's try and understand the treatment when there is a sale of an equity investment. Let's assume that the investments are either portfolio or strategic investments. It's safe to say that these assets are of capital nature. Any gain from such sale of shares could be characterized as capital profits and consequently excluded while computing net profits for CSR. In the event the sale results in a loss, it should be disregarded. That is, the net profit should be increased by the amount of loss incurred. I hope you found this useful. Thank you so much for watching. Please do leave your questions or feedback in the comment section below. Thank you.